In the city of Hartford, Connecticut, Pearl Street extends westward from Main Street, near the old State House, towards Bushnell Park. Back in the mid-1800s, the street had a number of residences, churches, businesses, and public buildings. As time went by, many insurance companies and banks would erect notable buildings on Pearl Street. In 1921, the Hartford Courant newspaper referred to Pearl Street as the Wall Street of Hartford. Most of the buildings that stood on Pearl Street 100 years ago are long gone today, replaced by several much larger skyscrapers, as well as several parking lots and a parking garage. But some traces of that earlier history survive. In this video, I'll talk about lost and surviving buildings on the north side of the block of Pearl that extends west from Main to Trumbull Street. In another video, I'll talk about the south side of that block, and then I'll have another video about the section of Pearl from Trumbull Street west to Ford Street. Today, the northwest corner of Main and Pearl Streets is dominated by the large building at 777 Main, which was built in the 1960s for the Hartford Bank and Trust and now contains apartments and businesses. Here's a view of the same corner in 1900. And here's the same area as represented in the Hartford Atlas of 1909. Back in 1870, the Connecticut Mutual Life Insurance Company erected a grandly ornate building at Main and Pearl. Behind it, further west on Pearl Street, was the Pearl Street Congregational Church, erected in 1852. The church was torn down in 1899 to make way for an addition to the Connecticut Mutual Building, which was also raised up by 2 additional stories. Here's a view of the addition that replaced the church as seen from the Pearl Street side. In the 1920s, the Hartford National Bank and Trust took over the Connecticut Mutual Building. It would eventually replace it with the current skyscraper at 777 Main Street. Just west of the Connecticut Mutual Building was another insurance company headquarters. In this 1909 atlas, it's listed as the Connecticut General Life Insurance Company, but it was built in 1873 for Phoenix Fire Insurance. The polychromatic brick structure was designed by a man who would later become one of America's most famous architects, Henry Hobson Richardson. Just a few years later, H. Richardson would design another Hartford landmark that survives today, called the Cheney or Richardson Building. For many years it was the home of Brown Thompson Department Store. In 1905, Phoenix sold its Pearl Street building to Connecticut General. This postcard shows Pearl Street in 1908. Here is the former Phoenix Insurance Building. When Connecticut General bought it, the company built a 3-story west addition designed by Davis and Brooks. The next building to the west was called the Kenmore Building. Here is a later view of the same area in the mid-20th century. A lot had changed. The old Phoenix Fire Insurance, later Connecticut General Life Insurance building, was rebuilt in 1920 and had an entirely new facade that erased the original Richardson design. Also in 1920, the circa 1907 addition had 2 more stories added to the top. The old Kenmore building was replaced by the Mechanics Savings Bank, erected in 1924-25. This building, which has 2 Doric columns, was designed by Morris and O'Connor of New York. Next west was a building designed by Isaac A. Allen, Jr. It was erected in 1919 for the Mutual Bank and Trust Company, and it was acquired by Riverside Trust Company in 1925. West of that was a building with a similar arched entryway designed by Smith and Bazette, which was erected in 1925 for the brokerage firm of Fuller, Richter, and Aldrich. It was also acquired by Riverside Trust in 1927. These former Riverside Trust buildings had completely altered facades by the time that the photo on the right was taken for the Historic American Buildings Survey in the early 1980s. At that time, next west was the Corning Building, erected in 1935, and west of that, at the corner of Pearl and Trumbull Streets, was a parking lot. Let's jump back to the same corner in 1910. On the right is the John B. Corning House, built circa 1854. The Corning estate still owned the property in 1935 when the Corning building I just showed you was built. Next door, where there was a parking lot in 1984, had stood a mansard-roofed municipal building called the Halls of Record. It was built in 1853 and housed a number of city officials. They would be moved to the new City Hall in 1915. The building was then torn down for a parking lot in 1940. Not long after this picture was taken, this block would be changed when the large building at 100 Pearl Street was erected in the late 1980s. Two traces of earlier buildings, however, survive, integrated into the new office tower. A medallion from the front facade of the 1935 Corning building was remounted onto the side of the new building, near where the Corning building had once stood, and the facade of the Mechanics' Savings Bank was preserved at the base of 100 Pearl Street's glass tower. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing, hitting the like button, leaving a comment. You can also visit my website, historicbuildingsct.com, and I have 2 books about Hartford that are available for purchase online as well. Thanks for watching.